Hello and welcome back to my channel, the best place to be to discover exactly how your thoughts and your emotions are affecting your health. Hi, I'm Andrew Coulter. I'm a doctor of medical health and homeopathy and the founder of the IOMA Healing System. This next bunch of videos, I'm actually going to be talking about how your emotional conflicts and traumas that you experience in life that you're just not able to fully release at the time or work through properly in the right way creates energetic scars and memories in your etheric life force. Those memories then continually send messages out to your physical body to give you a sign, to let you know exactly what it is that you're struggling with. And it's, are you being attentive to those signs? Are you aware that sometimes those low-grade chronic symptoms that you're carrying or experiencing and struggling with that you're just not really sure what's causing them is generally often because of an unresolved emotional and mental conflict? Because remember, your emotions are energy in motion. And so at that energetic, etheric level, when you're expressing something energetically, eventually, obviously, it has to be expressed in the physical body. Being attentive to what those signs are can often lead you then to knowing exactly what emotional struggle you're having and how to help you resolve that struggle. So that's what I'm going to do in this next bunch of videos, is go over different emotional states and the secret ways that they're manifesting in your body physically so that you can then learn to unravel them in the right way. So this week I'm talking about grief and the ways that grief manifests when it's not properly worked through and it's maybe being held chronically within your body. Grief is a really, really heavy emotional state. As you know, when you feel and experience grief at the time, how heavy it is, how, sad and down. We all talk about I feel down, when I'm sad, and it can affect the body in so many different ways. But the main way that grief actually manifests and works itself out is through your respiratory system and the lower kidney and bladder system. Therefore, unresolved grief issues or issues of deep loss and sadness are often expressed through lung diseases or chronic lung issues like, being prone to pneumonia all the time, sinus congestion, chronic sinusitis. A lot of times people have, massive headaches, and the headache is actually linked to chronic sinus congestion. So deep headaches is often linked to grief as well, and deep grief. Ears, think of all the things that are expressed when you are having deep grief issues. So when you're in the throes of being sad and crying, all of the symptoms that you're going to have, the eyes and the nose and the congestion in your throat and all of those symptoms, think of them acutely, then suppressed and chronically trying to come out. Imagine all those symptoms now being magnified and heavier and deeper and bigger. That's exactly how grief shows itself. But there are subtler ways that the body manifests the grief. And I'm going to go through a list for you and maybe get a piece of paper, write these down. Keep track of how many of these symptoms you actually have that you're not even aware are actually grief trying to work itself out, trying to tell you that you're hanging on to this old issue. And then I'm going to give you some ways at the end to help you really finally release and resolve those issues once and for all. Now remember that this list, isn't completely extensive. It's pretty much all the things that I've seen in my 25, 30 years of practice. Again, we're all individual. We're going to experience and express our things all in a very individual way, as well as it depends on the depth and the degree that you're holding that emotional state. How long have you been hanging on to that emotional state? That will also, show how it comes out in your body and to the depth and the degree that it does. So what symptom might be really subtle for one person might be massive in another person. So without further ado, let's go through the list. One of the biggest ways that, grief manifests itself in our bodies that's very untoward, something that we very often don't recognize, is just the simple fact that most people who are carrying some layer of deep grief feel really flat. You just can't get energetic. I can't be happy, literally. And that feeling of just can't get happy makes you feel flat and unresponsive, to things in life, and just having trouble carrying any kind of up energetic emotional state. So if you feel kind of flat overall, then it's a good bet that you're probably carrying some deep grief issues. Also feeling closed off, withdrawn, and super sensitive to all kinds of external stimulation. And especially the sun. Interestingly enough, is often people who are super sensitive to the sun and are affected deeply by too much heat, too much, sunlight, squinting and getting headaches in the sun, that kind of thing, or prone to heat stroke. It's often a deep layer of grief. Hanging on to insults, and being unable to let go, and criticism. Being really super sensitive to criticism. I used to have this one. I used to really get super upset when somebody makes some offhanded remark that probably wasn't even personally directed at me, but I took it personally. I carried a lot of deep unresolved grief, and I would say that many of these symptoms I had on some level, but one of the big ones was I remember being super sensitive, and of course, you're like that, and somebody makes a comment, and you start to well up, and they're like, the hell are you, crying about? I wasn't talking about you. But you feel it deep inside, and so it connects with you. And that's often a really good way to know that you're carrying some emotional state that you just haven't really worked through properly, is if external comments or events or actions by other people trigger that emotion in you, then it's a good bet that that emotion is just stuck in there and it's trying to find its way out. So even just welling up emotions and grief and sadness easily is a way to know, I'm carrying around a lot of sadness. I just need to have a good cry. Sometimes when I was clearing my stuff, I'd find a really good movie that just was a big tearjerker. P.S. I Love You. I think I went through 3 boxes of Kleenex when I watched that movie after I'd had a really good friend pass away. And I just needed to help myself cry and let go. That's a good way to actually release some of the unshed tears, is to find a really good sad movie and just have a good cry, have at it. Another interesting state is falling in love with unavailable people. Do you do that? It's a good sign that you're probably carrying a lot of deep, deep sadness and grief. I know that sounds really odd, but it's an actual fact that is one way the body expresses itself, by wanting deeply to love, but then loving someone that won't love you back. Interesting. Another one that, again, most people don't recognize is salt. Craving lots and lots of salty things, crunchy, salty things. It's the body's way of trying to replace and to push through a lot of minerals that get expelled when you cry a lot. So deep desire for salt is a strong indication you have some deep, deep grief. This was another one that, and actually this is one that I find I really recognize that when I'm doing this a lot, I go, apparently I have some sort of weird old deep layer of grief that's coming up that I need to maybe work through. Is sighing a lot for no apparent reason, just and yawning. Yawning when you're not even tired, but just feel the desire to constantly yawn. And you know what it is? It's because it's the body trying to break up the tension. As I said, this is a very deep, heavy emotion, and it weighs and it contracts the physical body. And so one way it does that is makes the musculature tight and contractive and crusty, really. So sighing, when you do a big sigh, I actually feel my back crack every time I do that. So it's like breaking up the tension in the body and in the lung, remember, respiratory area. So sighing and yawning a lot, if you're doing that all the time and chronically, you've got some grief. Maybe it's time to work through that. And of course, as I said, anything to do with the upper head and the respiratory system. So, dry eyes, chronic itchy, prone to allergies in the eyes, those kind of things, all grief. Chronic sinusitis, maybe post-nasal drip chronic. These are all signs of the body's attempt at crying, trying to release this deep, deep grief. Also, mid to lower back pain. I know that sounds really odd, but it's one of the symptoms of deep grief. Just feeling, again, maybe the weight in the back, the weight of the world, just You know, woe is me, Eeyore, I've been there. Chronic fatigue, obviously, you know, a really big sign. Like I said, that feeling flat and just can't get energized, can't be happy. MS is quite linked to deep grief layers, super contractive, if you will. And again, just general dryness overall. It's almost like it's a lack of moisture in the body. It's this dried up, pruned, cracking skin, chapped lips constantly, you know, licking the lips, always needing to put chapstick on. Been there, done that. So the other one is eczema. You know, we talked about dry skin and crackingness, but eczema and psoriasis is also a sign, like that drying kind of more eczema-y, dry, itchy, scaly skin is, again, deep grief layers. Cracked heels, you know, all those things where the body's super dry and cracked and contractive, and that's all grief layers of some sort. Again, obviously, like, okay, you're running around the beach and, you know, you're not moisturizing your skin and all those things. Yes, it's going to cause dry skin, but the chronicity of it and the deepness of it and the extent is often some grief issues. You know, we don't often stop to reflect on how, if I'm carrying around some emotional baggage and I just haven't allowed myself to fully process it, because, you know, we're just trying to get through life. We're trying to live our life forward, and I don't want to be stuck in that emotional state. I don't want to have to deal with it. But if you don't deal with it properly and you don't release it fully and properly, then it becomes contracted, and then the body holds it in various ways. And that's really what these videos are about, is helping you to see maybe some of the areas that, you know, you're having these weird chronic physical issues and you just can't figure out what the heck they're coming from. Then maybe look at that emotional body and find some ways to help resolve those emotional issues, which I'll share at the end of each video. And then you can help you to work through them and release them, and you'd be surprised how many of those symptoms actually go away. So there are so many deep layers of our emotions, and so, like I said, it's all going to be dependent on you and how well you do experience and express your emotions, how deep and chronic those issues are going to be, and how long it's going to take for you to then resolve them and allow yourself to release them properly. One of the things that people don't often realize is that they can be inherited. All emotional layers and baggage can be inherited from your parents. Just think of, you know, all emotions do cross the placenta. So if your mom, you know, when she was pregnant with you, was going through some very deep grief issues, like for instance, I was born premature because my mom's mom was dying of cancer at the time and was in the hospital and fading away. And that's a lot of baggage. That's a lot of emotional, deep emotional stuff for an extended period of time while I was in the womb. So of course, then I'm going to come out and carry some emotional baggage and memory from that time. And then eventually, as life weighs on me, those emotions then become more prevalent because I've already experienced and held them deeply as an unborn infant. So start thinking of those kind of things, you know, what did your mom go through? Again, maybe, you know, your mom is just chronically, maybe she's been depressed, maybe, you know, again, had all kinds of emotional baggage before she even had you. That emotional baggage is imprinted on infants, you know, and those infants are unconscious and unable to mentally, emotionally work through them. They just absorb them and take them on as theirs. So whatever the state is in the household, you're taking that on when you're a baby because you just can't consciously not. And then it becomes a part of you, and then you have to work through that. So it's not just about, oh, well, you know, my friends died in a car accident and I'm grieving this. But that grief is just compounded from all the other emotional layers that you've been carrying your whole life. So, you know, it's important to really stop and reflect on emotions and what those physical signs are telling you. So make sure you stick around and keep following this video series, because I'm going to go through all the weird different the emotions that we have, and all the interesting, maybe unconscious or unaware physical symptoms that you may be experiencing that's related to those emotions. So what I'm going to say is, you know, just to conclude this one about grief, is I gave you the one example about, if you feel like you're carrying some of these things, then find a way to express your grief. One of the best ways is really just to have a good cry, honestly. So whatever it takes for you, find a good book or a good movie. Movies always work for me. You know, there is some really good tearjerker movies out there. And then when you're watching that movie and you're wrapped up in it, watch what triggers you the most to cry. And maybe keep a little journal while you're watching movies like that, and start reflecting back on the areas in the movie that are triggered in you, and then think back in your life, you know, what's gone on in my life that's kind of similar to that state, that I'm resonating with, that I'm connecting with. And maybe try to work through, go back and consciously work through and allow yourself to express, write it out, you know, how you felt at that time that you maybe didn't allow yourself to feel. So those are really good ways to get rid of grief, as well as big, deep sighing breaths, but big expelling breaths. So just the big, it's like forcing that sigh out, forcing that contraction out of your body so that you can loosen up and feel lighter overall. Also really good green supplements, or lots of green vegetables. I know this sounds weird, but it's good etheric orgone energy. Put good food, like green food, into your body, because it picks up that energetic life force and allows it to feel lighter and healthier overall. Plus minerals. So taking mineral salts, Himalayan salt is a really cheap, easy way. You know, you put half a teaspoon in a big glass of water and drink that once or twice a day. Putting minerals back into the body will help, again, get rid of some of that tight, contractive, shut down dryness. Salt going into the body does not dry the body out. So those are really good physical ways. And then the last way is, I'm going to put a link below to my grief and loss kit. If you really am struggling to let go emotionally and mentally to some of these old issues, and you still can't seem to get rid of some symptoms, then I guarantee you this kit is going to help you. It goes through more diet advice, it goes through supplemental advice, it also gives you very specific Iome remedy combinations, which I used over the years to help myself release my own grief and my own loss layers, as well as all my clients, you know, when they go through grief layers, to really fully release it and finally put it behind you, because that's what we want to do. We want to live life forward and upward, not sideways and downwards or backwards. So hopefully this video has helped you a little bit. You know, how many of those things in that list are you struggling with right now on a very chronic level? If quite a few of them, even 3 or more, then I would bet you have some layer of grief. Honestly, we all do, that you're just not releasing and resolving. Go through some of these tips, go through some ideas, check out the link below, and remember, stay tuned, because next week I'm going to go through the secret symptoms of anger, just general all-out anger, how our body is trying to get our attention physically if you have got unresolved anger issues. So make sure you ring the bell, subscribe so that you get next week's video on time, and maybe check it out, because it's surprising how many symptoms we have that we're just not aware where the heck they're coming from. So until next week, have an amazing health-filled week, and remember, be authentic, be empowered, and own it completely.